Namaste, all of you. Good morning, one and all present here. It's an immense pleasure to welcome each and every member to be part of today's topic for learning and discussion. Well, today, with the enforcement of the current social distancing in pandemic scenario, communication is now taking a lead role and it's giving a new trajectory to all the sectors, and the need for it cannot be avoided. In this situation, we need to understand the importance of the virtual communication. So, I welcome one and all in my presentation and looking forward to the discussion after the session. Today, my presentation will cover three objectives. That is, the overview of virtual communication, the challenges of virtual communication, and how to overcome virtual communication. Before I start my discussion, can we have a small kind of interaction with one another? So I want all of you to observe the second slide. Well, dear participants, or let's say my esteemed stakeholders, I look forward that all of you go through the slide and highlight which are the areas of the sectors. Looking at the pictures, could you just give a review of which area the pictures belongs to? A small hint. I would like to give you whether it belongs to health sector, which picture depicts health sector. So we will start up from the first one. Yes. Am I audible? You can just send your requests through your statements through your chat box. That will help me to understand. We will start from the left. The first picture belongs to which sector? Yes? Not audible? All right, sales. Fine. It's a sales business on online buying. Good. Moving on to the second one. The second picture. Okay. E-commerce. Great. E-tailing. Great. Video conference. Very good. Yes, second picture belongs to online meeting, or let's say Zoom meeting. Coming to the third picture, can you identify what the picture states about? Okay, great, IT sector, but that is with relevance to business. Moving on to the fourth picture on top slide. Artificial intelligence, great. Yes. Skype, great. That is an educational sector where an instruction of teaching learning is going on from the instructor and audience point of view as a student. Yes. Social sector, great. Conference, good. Fine. So we have got a lot of response from your end, wherein all the pictures as covers one component, that is through all the sectors proceedings and process are carried in today's scenario through nothing but virtually. Well, great to get response from all of you, and all of you have really interest on this topic, and that's why the response was impromptu. Well, I take back towards the session. Coming back to healthcare and It's muted. Coming back to the healthcare sector, when we talk about education, we also know that media, social distancing across the globe due to coronavirus has created the need to conduct business virtually. Well, web conferencing, video, Skype, Zoom provides all sorts of platform through the available means and tools to conduct all the sectorial roles and responsibilities in a professional manner, that is through virtual communication. With this expansive use of mobile and video devices, it's very important to understand how the use of technology and the skills of verbal and nonverbal communication will really bring in perspective role in the area of virtual communication. Keeping that in mind, I would like to take forward my presentation for today's session. Next, there is a question which I would like to impose. Are all forms of online communication alike? Well, that's a question factor. And keeping this concept in mind, let me begin with the statement that we look into how the distance of human connections have been connected with the area through virtual contact. Not surprisingly, the entire world has been inundated with the best practices through virtual team building, virtual collaboration, and lastly, and most importantly, communication. This buzzword virtual has been a part and parcel of our life in this situation, in the today's scenario. Moving on to the next slide. When we talk about the question of virtual communication, all of us have a question to ask ourselves. What is virtual communication? Well, it can be used to describe anything that exists in effect but not in fact. Used to describe things in a computer, on online world, something that exists in essence but not in reality. In simpler terms, people communicate without being face to face. An example of its usage is in training sessions. That is e-learning, webinar, Zoom meeting, virtual recruitment, tutorial classes, and presenters can communicate and provide lessons from anywhere and everywhere using the right tools and the right time. As discussed from the perspective of the scenario, I would like to keep in mind some of the questions which, as an instructor, we need to understand to have an effective art of communication through virtual. The instructor or the presenter need to have the question factor in mind. Therefore, we have to state the fact that WH factors play a very, very important role in our life, be it from the presenter coming from health sector, the presenter coming from educational sector, the presenter going through a virtual team conference or a meeting, and so on and so forth. Well, we need to ask ourselves a few questions, and the questions are, who is the audience? How do we virtually connect? What tools are required by the trainer and the user? Is there a process in place for ensuring that all communications stands and standards are same? How all files will be exchanged? Does the documentation meet the training objective? Well, how do we easily transfer the knowledge? How the language and the facts are appropriate to understand within the culture? How do we ensure the current knowledge has been transferred to the session of the audience who are maybe from the client source, maybe as a tutor, and as a tutor, a student, or any business professionals or any industry expert. And these days, even art, dance, and culture, they are also heading towards the process of virtual communication performance. Further, the cloud and the mobile devices helps the trainer and the user by providing a quick access to documentation and training session. With an easier access to learning and communicating, everyone has means and opportunity to be efficient. Following that, as a presenter, we need to understand that we have to have a very important note of these questions keeping in mind and further questions to be formed or framed in our mind as yes note. Did the training and documentation meet the purpose and goals? Did we follow the existing process and standards of communicating? Did we provide an appropriate and beneficial information through content, slide, video, and presentation? Did we use the best right of tools? Or to produce the documentations and training programs? So these are some of the factors which needs to be kept in mind before we take it forward to have an effective art of communication. Coming back to a note of maintaining the downloaded files and documents, which is also one of the most important component of this area. Is there a schema where all training documents on presentations and videos are kept? Is there an existing content management system that will help to stay organized? Well, most importantly, collecting feedback, because virtual is a factor wherein the stakeholder who are our audience play a very, very important role for the presenter. Therefore, the process are set of goals to get feedback from users, be it clients, as stated earlier, developers, or any other, so forth. Nevertheless, bearing these questions in mind, we are going to take it forward that the art of virtual communication need to have a fluency in the area of competency. To achieve a shared understanding, per se, the colleagues, clients, and other members need to understand to operate collaboratively, sincerely, efficiently across all cultures and zones. We also have to keep in mind the time zones, as we have great impact on the areas of culture for conducting virtual communication. Today, virtual communication play a very important role in the globalized world, and we cannot avoid the factor that this play a very, very important statement. And when we talk about the trust, the role of trust play a very pivotal role. Look at the model in the slide given here. As we come to the closer level of business environment, it's common to have offices in different geographical locations across the world. Therefore, in order to ensure organizations, we need to understand goals. Employees need to understand effective virtual communication practices and put theme into action. Taking back to you through the chart, which is displayed in the slide. When we talk about Moving on to the previous slide, the chart states here the need factor and the key factor of the communication, trust, leadership, and social presence. Now, when we talk about this, it actually takes us to leverage the factors to have a beautiful virtual relationship and to improve the team performances. Why I am giving specific reason for team performances? Because the world is heading towards the collaborative factors and every individual has a connect towards to make a team, to form a team. Therefore, these four components play a very, very crucial role, taking through the concept of communication, followed by trust as a foundation to improvise the interpersonal relationship, intrapersonal relationship, and cross-cultural relationship. Having a leader, every factor within the self-made learning as a presenter will promote an effective and good leadership skills, and also he must know or she must know a factor in mind that when these skills develop, since the world is heading towards the digitization, the presenter needs to be acknowledged with technical tools which are upcoming in the heading run to go. Lastly, the social presence, which imbibes or builds up a relationship as stated, be it the presenter or the audience who are our most important stakeholders. Well, with this statement of facts, we understand that to improve the key factors of virtual communication, we need to understand and set objectives, standards, and norms to be able to handle this particular form of communication, which is very, very important and future to go. Coming back to the next slide. Well, we have discussed about virtual communication and its importance in the world of the sectors or global. Now we are moving on to difference between direct communication and virtual communication. It's always seen that many of the experts fail to understand that direct communication was in process, is in process, will be in process, but most importantly, virtual communication will take through the direct communication. Well, when we talk about direct communication, it's nothing, but it's exactly what they say or the people say. They share through the insinuation of mixed message. For example, a scientist saying the results of experiment are positive, or a journalist giving a statement that the accident occurred at 6 p.m. Both are factual data because the direct communication is based on facts. What you say, I believe that. And people communicate direct. Here, the speaker clearly states that his thoughts, or the presenter states that his thoughts will be feeling and opinion is shared in the form of verbal message. Let me tell you, direct communication involves what a person thinks and feels, and it is one-to-one. The receiver can view you and the speaker can view the receiver. So it's like that. Whereas it is marked also with active listening and effective feedback instant. Well, there is no pretense or hidden message in the communication in the form of direct communication. Whatever emotions, feelings, statements have a facts and is accepted and influenced by information to collect from the individuals and the group. And it gives an important note of the fact that it is built with the statement of principle. As already discussed in the above slide or the previous slide about the direct communication, I would also like to add one very, very important point here. Virtual communication actually evolved in the year 1990, and it is also known as digital communication, digital organization, and modular organization, with the reference of information and communication technology, none other than ICT, in the today's world of dynamic market. It is also stated to be cost-effective, fast space, and information is shared across the globe in the fraction of seconds and secure. So, we need to understand that virtual communication, keeping all these factors in mind and previous factors in mind, it is a best mode of communication which involves highly two component of element of communication, that is audio and video, because people are not physically present before us. They are only communicating specifically towards these two keywords, that is audio and video. Next, we move on to as how the word virtual communication came to the place, or how it triggered. As already discussed in the beginning, that with the pandemic situation, the virtual world has been transformed to a very important note of facts, that is purpose-built world, the world with a purpose, a value, and an objective. Well, when we talk about this, it is a connect in the form of skills and technology. We are distributed all across with time, space, and culture. But the art of virtual communication has always been an influential fact. And this influential fact states nothing but globalization and cross-cultural communication interactions among the members, be it the speaker or be it the audience. Today, we need to understand that the world is a long distance of dynamics with collaboration and impact of culture play a very, very important role in the manners, the way we speak, the way we behave, our body language, how to use technology to communicate, involvement with multiple teams across continents in different time zones has been possible with the advancement of technological tools. Therefore, establishing a virtual team collaboration allows to harness the skills from around the globe with different time zones. Clear communication play a very important role with the gain credit, and it includes the ability to participate, At the same time, contribute productively in business, meetings through insights, verbal, presentation skills, and above all, the advancement of technological tools. Another important point needs to be added here. As discussed often, the cultural fit. Are the presenters comfortable with skills and technology? Can they work across various time zones? We need to seriously think about it. And also, this relates to a situation wherein, as I put before you, thus we need to understand the connect, coordinate, collaborate are the three efficient management that will increase productivity between the speaker and the listener, not forgetting the fact that virtual is through audio and video learning skills. Well, a virtual communication leader has the balance of ground, need to find the right balance of ground, and to maintain the leverage upon this direct reflection is on the art of virtual communication. This ties with my original statement, which has actually provoked me to select the topic art of virtual communication. With the current situation of pandemic, COVID-19 has brought in reality of remote work from home and significantly depend upon entirely on virtual interactions. Therefore, that is the trigger which has evoked today in every individual's mind how to make or carry through an effective role of virtual communication. Well, this leads me to the next point. What are the principal goals of virtual communication? When we talk about communication, we cannot forget that communication is an exchange of information. Well, it is through open and honest communication, which will really lead to provide the clarification. Therefore, in one statement I said, or I mentioned, feedback. As we are in through audio video, therefore, the exchange of information needs to be very, very open-ended. And it only is possible, as mentioned in the previous slide, through connect, collaborate, and communicate lastly. To offer support. Well, in the context to the documents, with refer to demonstrate respect and consideration, we need to understand that there should be a support from presenter point of view, who is the speaker, and audience point of view, who are our stakeholders. Well, when we talk about this, we also look at the next point, which states about converse and socialize. Well, this builds a relationship which creates a sense of camaraderie and to make the connections very effective. Later, we also state that the goals are to report across simultaneously to communicate. As the world is heading to globalization, we need to understand the fact that we are sharing information and knowledge. Lastly, communication needs to understand the backbone of debatable skills. We should not forget, as it is audio video, we need to understand that communication plays a very important role of understanding through question-answer session. Asking questions as stated in previous slides or previous talk of discussion, that WH play a very, very important factor. Moving on to the next slide. Although we are aware of that there is absolutely no shortage of communication tools in the global economy. Therefore, I want to get connected back to you. Dear members, may we have a little discussion or sharing note through? Discussion is not possible, but sharing note can be possible. There are various tools, and as I said that the world is heading towards digitization, the tools have become very, very important and connective factors to carry on with a successful communication skills. So if you could state a fact that collaborative tools, what are the collaborative tools? Can you just state what are the new tools of collaborative tools which are shared through in today's world? Name one or a few. Am I audible? Could you just text a few factors of collaborative tools which are used today? Let me give you a hint. Slack, WebEx team, Trello, great. Microsoft Teams, Google Drive, great. Redbooth, Huddle, OK Zoom, Blackboard, Zoho Connect, and many more. Moving on to project management tool. Any project management tools can we share? Okay, Trello. And it is also seen that most of the tools can be used and utilized for both the purposes. It can use or utilize for project management tools, or it can be used for collaborative and communication tools or meeting tools and so on. Fuse, yes, great. A few tools to state on with: Lighthouse, Zoho Connect, Active Collaboration, Smartsheet, WorkZone, great. Project of Teamwork, Jira, Asana, Trello, as stated. Proof Hub, great, good. Let's say about few document storage tools. Yes, good. iCloud, great. Zoho, Google Drive, which is a very common method of storage tools and being used in most of the institutions. Sharing point, yes. OneHub, great. Meeting tools, Zoom, great. ProofHub. Any other? File cabinet, great. Skype, BlueJeans, JoinMe, Google Meet, Cisco Telepresence, and many more. Instant messaging, great, great. Hightail, good. GoToMeeting, fine, great. WebEx, Skype, Mattermost, Yahoo Messenger, great. OneHub, yes, good. Blink, wow. Document co-creation tools, Telegram, okay. Yahoo Messenger, WhatsApp, though WhatsApp is used for formal purpose sometimes, as a institutional role, a group of members from various institutions can join in, yes, and as one of the social interactions, even calling. Sometimes if the Zoom doesn't work, we take instant support through WhatsApp. It is one of the most prominent factor, yes. Document co-creation tools, Prezi, great. Hangouts, wow, good. Doodle, schedule, yes. Extensio, great. Any scheduling tools to name a few? One is time and date. Yes, Zoom meeting. Yes, HubSpot scheduling, great. Lastly, virtual team games. I need to get that from you. Genie, PUBG, yes, good. Quiz breaker, watercolor, trivia. So there are many more. Well, Google Meet, great, Hike, Lido. So talking about all these tools, which is a very, very important role of communication, and to carry the communication forward, it gives us an important note that we need to understand how to manage these tools to be able to reach to audience through time zone and at the instant situation wherein organization cannot wait for any purpose, but it has to move on through audio video communication. Moving on to the next slide. Well, I had already discussed that my second objective will take me through the challenges of virtual communication. And it is one of the most important factor to make us realize that how important to understand the challenges of virtual communication. We have to remember that even though we have entered a new world of virtual communication and digitization, we still communicate with the real world ways, and it don't always work in the virtual world. The world communication takes place and all rules do not apply all time. It is very, very challenging and dynamic. The same rules don't apply. The leaders do have major issues and it has to be addressed with the challenges of virtual communication. There are a lot of problems with reference to virtual communication. Firstly, as stated before, lack of feedback. Now, there are two types of feedback. One is implicit and the other is explicit. Well, the implicit feedback is nothing, but it carries on about nonverbal sounds, facial expression, touch, body language, and that goes with conversation in the form of conversation skills. Explicit feedback is nothing, but it is straightforward, unvarnished communication that we believe in and receive from others. In the virtual world, implicit feedback is non-existence. Moving on to the next, as one factor of lack of feedback is trust. The trust in the virtual communication is very, very fragile and it's easier to establish initially. But the big difference comes from when it threatens trust. It shatters very little provocation and it's impossible to re-establish. Lack of empathy. When we talk about this factor, it needs to be elaborated a little. As we are heading towards the role of globalization, cultural diversity play a very important role and quite challenging to handle it. The key lesson in empathy is when we are face to face, even the coldest situation we are able to handle with mirror neurons. The mirror neuron word was coined by Professor Christian Kaiser, and in his research, he stated that this empathy is nothing but it experiences an emotion. We laugh, we cry, we bond together, but which is hard to find in today's virtual world. Virtual space and empathy can't work as mirror neurons because it does not fare readily in the world of virtual and gets easily disassociated. Therefore, to maintain a consistency, it's very, very important to have and understand the challenges of lack of empathy in the virtual world. Talking about the lack of control. Well, virtual world is unforgiving as we hold others to rigid standards of behavior, and also we see that the standards is particularly lacking in the emotional in-depth of substitute brittle intellectual standards, and we need to have a control on what we say to others. Moving on to the lack of connection and commitment, we talk about the factors that technology is a great challenge and it is an inability to be present, sometimes overscheduled, fear of rejection, social anxiety, lack of self-protection, fear of failure leads to the lack of connection and commitment. Semantic barrier. It plays a very, very important role. We talk about semantic barrier, which refers to misunderstanding between the sender and receiver, which mainly arises due to different meanings. And also at the same time, the purpose of communication is missed out. It can be people or proper when we talk about, say, coming up with denotation and connotation, unclarified assumptions, faulty translations, bad expressions, technical jargons. It can also speak people from different language, different dialect, and it is very, very difficult to manage this area in a strong form of digital communication. Sometimes it gets miscommunicated through hashtags, emojis, or sending SMSs, which conveys a lot of complex ideas. And this creates a barrier to the semantic communication. Moving on to accessibility barrier. Our uniqueness is a mix of our individual personality and culture. In the cultural background, when we talk about macro level, we talk about country, region, company, and cultural level, we have the tendency to be clearly and visible. On a micro level, we have person and individual personalities. They have a high importance, and also it gives a great of barriers to be able to be accessibility through the individual persons individually or independently to meet them. Attention barrier. Coming back to attention barrier, we also have to not forget one, that time difference. With reference to the time difference, technological barrier gives a great form of managing place and time when we are globally connecting with all people. Sometimes in rural areas or remote areas, technology can be a challenging factor. And that is also one of the important components of accessibility barriers. Talking about attention barriers, language barrier is the most important hurdle. One. Secondly, when we talk about attention and cultural barrier together taken into, we also need to not forget that every form of communication is multicultural, is going through multicultural environment. Therefore, issue of status quo is a great question factor. To quote an example here, Americans have a need for speed, whereas they meet up the target on time. But here, when communicating with Japanese, they are very, very particular about work ethics. And this is ensured properly when they are able to see that the perfection speaks by itself. Physical barrier to nonverbal communication. This is one of the most important factor which actually gives a major role to carry on with art of virtual communication. When we talk about nonverbal factor, before I start, we have to elaborate these facts that the cues, the gesture, the posture, the body language, and expression, eye contact, everything plays a very, very important role. The tone of voice, the clothes, the clothing, as a speaker or a presenter, these all facts are very, very important to keep in consideration. It's like a spice, and we use this communicating by adding a little flavor. To repeat, nonverbal is like a spice, and communicating through it is adding flavor to the voice and tone. When we talk about physical barrier, we should not forget about text design and visual features. They have a very, very important role along with the body language, the facial expression, what we have discussed so on and so forth. Physical barrier also has a great role on creates, let's say, a geographical distance. And it also has a role on the sender and receiver as faced with lack of communication to understand these features. To continue with the next slide. Psychological barrier. Well, this barrier creates in our mind and it prevents us effectively to communicate. Taking an example to elaborate on psychological barrier, fear. It is a state of mind wherein the mental assumption develops due to lack of knowledge and at the same time confidence. Perception. In the mindset where presenter vis-a-vis tend to become judgmental. As each person has its own personality and perception of reality is shaped from mental and sensory experience. Mood. We never know a preoccupied and subconscious mind of the presenter may hurdle experiencing or may hurdle the performance of a good talk. Also, with regard to barriers of listening, memory, that's also one of the component, and this actually creates a hurdle where we think about present and future situation is related to past experience, and it becomes difficult to recall and reconsider. Attitude that cannot be forgotten. Attitude of overconfidence is also sometimes gives a kind of a barrier to communication with reference to psychological barrier. And this also covers a component with reference to emotional barrier. The emotions are provoked in face-to-face communication. You are happy, it's in. You are unhappy, it is viewed. But then in the virtual communication, it does not have much of existence. But we do understand that when non-verbal play a challenging role, verbal will definitely get impacted. Moving on to wrong assumptions. Well, wrong assumptions is one of the most important and challenging factor. Reason, the virtual communication is challenged with lack of trust, as discussed earlier in few slides, lack of receptive frame of mind, and also fear. That is one of the most important disruption with status quo, as repeated earlier. Talking about selective perception. Well, for example, movement of eye of the individual while performing specific task. We need to understand that it is a broad term to identify, and it is also one of the most important things wherein we understand that selective perception takes place where you are interested with the content, you become selective. When you don't know the content or when you are not interested, you are hard of listening with selective perception. And it is not only from the presenter point of view, but this perception is stated from the audience point of view too, which becomes a challenge factor for virtual communication. Listening and retention. We know importance of listening and retention is great challenge because the content, the speech, the medium through which we are carrying on, it all brings and finally the feedback, it all carries or considered presenters and the audience point of view as a barrier to listening. When we understand that, the listeners may feel sometimes that the knowledge of the subject is extensive or it's very hard to understand the speaker, the attention span reduces automatically. Therefore, overloading of information is also one of the factors which brings a barrier to listening and retention. Let me say every single point has a connect with one another. Coming back to the listening, we need to understand that the medium, the distraction, the speed of language, the judgmental effort, the rate of speech, and these are some of the important notes to be kept in mind, which also creates a barrier to listening and retention skills. As we know that listening is a receptive skill. Talking about information overload, we are aware that this is something, anyway, I would like to add on this point here. This particular information overload was actually coined by Bertram Graham in the year 1964 when he was doing a he's a professor of political science and he was doing a research on it. In this, he has understood that when information sometimes gets overloaded, the retention gets diluted. Moving on to information gap principle. Well, the information gap principle is nothing but it is a language which competency wherein we try to code that we have seen there are a lot of tasks and techniques which are missed out amongst the audience, either through language skill or either through speaking skill. Now, when we talk about this, it is a challenging area of virtual communication. Tools can also be a gap principle. Fluency is one of the factors as spoken with reference to language. I would like to state an important note here. As we are all experiencing day to day the experience of virtual communication, my journey into the online world to understand virtual communication as how profound has led me to understand this, that how profound are the barriers of virtual communication. Reason, our human role is put to emotional, is put to commitment, and also this attenuated world has to sprung up around us to make us realize that these barriers play a very, very challenging role in the area of virtual communication or to process the virtual communication. Moving on to how to overcome the virtual communication. Well, when we talk about how to overcome the virtual communication, there are a lot of techniques which are involved to overcome the virtual communication. And we also know that everything is possible. Nothing is, it always says that it's impossible, but we have to believe in that every impossible can be taken and converted into possible. Talking about the first point on build goals on common ground of communicating with candor, here I would like to give importance to culture of candor. This brings in the improvement of camaraderie, communication, and collaboration. Citing an example from here, from Google to hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, leading companies are adapting a growing trend of leadership and communication. Today, the virtual communication or the world is leading from personal one-to-one to team retrospective, which was actually stated in the earlier slides in the discussion note. The quick emails are transforming into digital signage communication. So the candor can bring in the cohesive unit for faster professional development and increase in business value. Well, communication with candor, I would like to highlight some of the important points. Be humble and never aggressive. At the same time, helpful and constructive, not critical. Guidance needs to be provided immediately and do not wait for later. Being a human being is important. We are not robots. Coming from receiving candor, this was stated with reference to offering candor through communication. Receiving candor through communication is be appreciative and never defensive. Be open to new things or ways of thinking and keep the mind as open-ended, not the close-ended. Give yourself time to reflect, be supportive, and at the same time offer knowledge, guidance without keeping judgment in mind. Already discussed about the challenges of listening, would like to take forward the art of listening, taking through an acronym of look interested or get interested, involve yourself is I, stay on target is S, test your understanding, and lastly N, neutralize your feelings, which covers to listen. Therefore, active listening helps to build the most important component. Keeping goals in mind, to build relationship, solve problems, ensure understanding, and avoid conflicts. Well, the world is heading towards diversities, and culture is full of complexities and diversities. So, greater distance and virtual dependency with new awareness for an effective communication should begin. Moving on to the next role of nonverbal communication. Well, it plays a very important role. When we talk about nonverbal communication, I'll take you to the next slide. Taking back to the nonverbal communication, we know that attitude play a very important role. Let's move on to the next slide. I want you to look at it. It's something which is part and parcel of our nonverbal communication. And we will not forget that nonverbal communication play a very, very essential role to bring in the verbal communication in the art of communication. Now, talking about nonverbal communication, we also know that it plays an important role as stated by. If we talk about the key words, we can see here haptics, physical appearance, kinesics or kinesics, facial behavior, facial expressions, paralanguage, acoustics, environmental details, chronomics, olfactics. Relevant to that, there are many key factors which gives a connective role with sub-factors, for example, haptics with body contact, facial, and you can see the entire forms of non-verbal communication or elements, let's say, which helps us to understand the goal to be an effective and carry on with effective non-verbal communication. Needless to say, I would like to add one point here. When we talk about nonverbal communication, we also state the important factors that with area of video, we have to give more priority to eye contact, facial expression, and ensure that it goes very effectively. But at the same time, we cannot see or overlook the four interconnected elements. They are timely communication, which is built in trust in attitude, relevant communication built on clear, concise and content based, sufficient communication, which is in depth and insight, and lastly, responsible communication, which is nothing but verbal and non-verbal communication. Talking about this, we need to say the art of nonverbal communication also has a major dominant with the listening skills. And this, in fact, carry forwards with listen with curiosity, look out what isn't being said, at the same time welcome open-ended questions, and also with deliberate effort and practice, definitely we will be able to hold on. All the components of the key factors, if we look back at the previous slide, nonverbal communication, listening, they're all interconnected. Therefore, it is also stated that it requires focus skills, but also focus and skills are important and connected for art of listening through the area of nonverbal communication. Moving on to the art of language as a leadership. When we talk about this factor, we also know about that these factors play a very, very important role. Language cannot be overcome. And this language will take us through the next slide, which is 7 C's of communication. And here, when we are talking about the art of language, we need to highlight the most important factors that communication is complete only when we convey all facts required by audience. It is also seen that communication helps better in decision-making ability, also ability to persuade audience. When we talk about conciseness, it's a very important and effective tool. We convey least possible words, but at the same time, it needs to be appealing and at the same time, very comprehensive. That will develop a role of effective listener from audience perspective. Talking about consideration, in the layman term, I would say stepping into the shoes of others is nothing but audience-centric, and audience-centric can be ensured through self-respect, efficacy to understand the emotions, and also need to take care of that we respect one another. Concreteness. These are all spoken from the area of verbal communication. Therefore, I had to highlight 7Cs just to give you a brief preview of the art of language. When we talk about the clarity, when we talk about, moving on to the previous point, concreteness, it is supposed to be specific with facts, figures, and graphs. We need to, again, another point to note, we need to build a rapport with strength and positivity. We also see that clarity, which is an important point, gives an exchange of thoughts, clear and complete, so that the meaning is passed through a message using appropriate and concrete words. Courtesy. Today's world needs empathy, as discussed earlier. Therefore, courtesy and rapport has to be there. And it strengthens the presenter's confidence by having courtesy through rapport. Correctness. Well, practice. Here, I need to say practice makes skill perfection. Therefore, errors in oral communication needs to be avoided. It helps to check the precision and accurateness to build in facts and figures. We can see that each functionalities are productive in the context of virtual communication with reference to 7Cs. And we also should agree, moving on to the next slide, that 4Ps are also interdependent with 7Cs. Talking about all the context of what we have discussed so far, I would like to take you through a few etiquettes of the components of virtual communication as a presenter point of view. Firstly, when we talk about 4Ps, we need to understand that there are a few of the tips which we need to handle very carefully. They are mute and unmute microphone. We need to set a background, be it work from home or anywhere as stated through virtual communication. Ensure that the professional standard is met with. We need to understand to avoid clutter, because too many things in the clutter as a clutters gives a disassociation of speaking or listening. Look into the platforms of webcams and also have an alternative. When we talk about this, we need not forget which a point I did not mention, and I want to mention here because 4Ps are the ultimatum of the presentation skills, and that is dress the part, dress decorum. Be neatly and appropriately dressed at a meeting or any kinds of situation through virtual gives a lot of confidence, a lot of trust, and therefore dress plays a very, very important role which cannot be forgotten. Dressing decorum is one of the most important factors which needs to be considered. We need to understand that if we are working from home, we need to see that when we are in the world of professional and we are interacting with other people, they have to understand. They can be client, they can be any professional bodies. It can be in the process of recruitment too. We need to understand where we are. And if we are at present in the form of working, we need to give priority for the dress and decorum to maintain that dress in a very formal as a code of conduct. So these are some of the factors. Again, we need to understand how to start on before the session. We need to warm up and also take a few deep breaths to start the session, which is a part and parcel of a speaker's presentation. Ensure devices are fully charged to avoid depleting of message or depleting meeting in the midst of the presentation. Close applications of files which needs to be intended to play. Display empathy before talking business. Start with the warm-up greetings as stated already. Again repetitive and repeated body language, one of the most important factor which cannot be overlooked or avoided. That is gaze, which we discussed in that model of structure, which was presented before you in the form of a visual image. We understand the eye gaze play a very, very important role. We need to have a prosodic in our verbal communication. Facial expression play a very important role, and hand gesture. We need to understand that these are some of the important factors which needs to be perceived. From the audience point of view, we need to understand that we need to check the login time and logout time. So with this, I do agree that all the factors of the 4 P's of presentation has to have a great role to play. Delivering an effective communication or a presentation, we need to consider some of the important points. One is voice, one is pace, the other one is pitch, and the lastly volume. The power of speaking or the speech needs to play a very important role. It comes by itself. Well, moving on the next slide. Here, coming back to present. What next in virtual communication? These are 2 news stories which a link has been provided, but I will just give you a small brief about it. Necessity is the mother of invention. As stated in the coronavirus pandemic, has dragged the world economy towards plummeting graph. Virtual reality and augmented reality, along with mixed reality and extended reality, are the fields of new generation information and communication. Technology, which will have a significant contribution, will also take an attempt to combat COVID-19. These deep solutions have enabled work from home, distance learning, and entertainment too has joined through the activities of virtual communication. Therefore, post-COVID-19, world will see surge in deep tech such as augmented and virtual reality. Talking about the next news story, which states about the floodgates are open. There's no ignoring the potential benefits of remote working now. We are going to continue seeing a rapid adoption to remote learning and home working. After the pandemic is over, at the same time, employees may be feeling reluctant to return back to work, and they discover that virtual communication brings in a lot of time savings, efficiency, and from remote working, and also they look forward that they will continue to see innovations to expand the functionality of the virtual working environment. Innovation with artificial intelligence and voice assistance is likely to appear rapidly. What's more, there is a good chance that the virtual meeting space will continue to add value for participants to get more work done, or get work done rather, through efficiently and effectively staying work from home. And that's the topic states about post-COVID-19 world will see surge in deep tech such as augmented and virtuality. At the same time, moving on to the content of this point, I'm repeating, virtual communication isn't just a trend, it's the future of work. The 2D world of cloud communication is evolving into a genuine 3D experiences, which you and I agree with. Well, let's move on to a video to share with you that what's next for the virtual.
In setting up the best system, we want to look at a schedule. Scheduling ourselves first thing in the morning by setting our alarm clock, taking our shower, dressing for work, the same pieces that would go into the puzzle of our morning routine if we were leaving the house. What we want to avoid is there's a trap of sleeping a little longer, maybe an extra hour, not showering, jumping up, being in our bathrobe, hitting the on button for our laptops, and then starting to work. Take out a pad, maybe it's a single sheet of paper, whatever works for you, and write down your 3 top priorities for the day. What are the tasks that you really need to accomplish today? How do you need to move your projects forward? And you can refer back to that as you may during the day fall down that digital rabbit hole. We want to be able to quickly access, hey, wait a second, I'm a little off track. Let me get my brain back on track and let me look at what it is that I really need to work on today. Take micro breaks. We know that when we take micro breaks, it actually relaxes our brain. And when we relax our brain, it re-energizes us, it re-engages us, and we make less errors. Go to the window, look outside, take a pad of paper over to a different chair, give yourself 5 minutes, doodle. We've got to mix it up. We want to keep a schedule, and at the same time, we want to be flexible enough to mix it up. While it's tempting to turn on the television, maybe catch up on a favorite program, or it might feel really good to put a load or 2 of laundry in and get that done, you've got to remember that you're sticking to the schedule of I'm working from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, 9 to 6. You're not managing your home right now. You're managing business. Set the time that you're going to end your day. Don't let it drag. I'll do it after dinner, and then it's 8 o'clock, and then you say, well, I really need to finish this project, and then you go to 10 p.m., and then you go, oh my gosh, it's 10:30, but I'm not done with the project, and I said I was gonna finish the project no matter what, and the next thing you know, it's 1 in the morning. So the way that you can make sure that you avoid that is set your start time, set your end time. It's like bookends. Make sure you've got 2 bookends to your day. You can go out and take a walk. Even if you walk around a parking lot, even if you walk around your backyard or you walk through your neighborhood, but there are ways that we can make this work and we can still get exercise. We can take a bike ride, we can jump rope, you can buy a hula hoop. Maybe you want to turn on some music for 30 minutes and have a dance party. I've done that myself and it's kind of fun. So you can do that. And again, it gets you more creative and more productive to finish your day and takes you out of that slump.
Well, it's time for us to understand. Looking at this video, I'm sure, on the contrary, you must have all understood how to manage life, taking work from home scenario, which we are all looking at in the future may to come, maybe. There is a question, we all keep that in mind, but we should have this in our mind that time, commitment, and engagement is very, very important. And this definitely will make the art of virtual communication professional and productive. With this, I would like to end my talk today. I'm very happy to share discussion and feedback but would like to add one more note to you that since the topic is absolutely practical, I am available at debolina@msrim.org, and you can reach me because as you experience, you understand the importance of gap, of how to overcome the challenges of communication through virtually. I would also like to state a fact that this topic has encouraged me to go for further research. So I would like to add you as you are my esteemed participants, which has brought in to take it forward to work more or research more on how to overcome the challenges and what are the other challenges which can be identified in the field of virtual communication. Well, yes, please discuss on impact on child effect of communication gap where there is no physical communication. I agree with you, Achinta Das. Yes, it's very, very crucial at the moment. But this is a very good question which has motivated me to share one fact. Every individual has a small inhibitions in their personality, that is creativity and hobby. I may be wrong, but then you need to identify that what is interested upon the child, and you need to understand that when the child is in the indoor, he needs some kind of creative activity to be associated with. Therefore, the interest what he likes or she likes, that can be taken care of since physical communication is missing, one component. Secondly, there are a lot of creative hobbies which are available. I would like to add one, Speak Mackey. They are a group of people who actually gives a lot of importance to how to manage art and culture. So that will help initial stage for the little one to carry on with the hobbies. And we do understand. That's why I share direct communication is not there. But we need to follow the role of virtual, and also it needs to be entertaining. Therefore, it can be taken care that try to identify that hidden hobby and creativity, what he is good at or she is good at, and that can replace the gap which is physical education. I hope I have reached you.
Hello.
Hello, Gupta.
Hello. Yeah. Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you?
Very nice to see you.
Thank you. It was really very nice to hear you after 2 years, which I was actually eager for.
So,
Uh, ma'am, my question is: you were talking about the remote education. So, how do I take it as like? The question could be that how to take advantage of social isolation, which is going because of COVID-19. How could I take that to generate and boost the transition from face-to-face education to remote education?
yeah, uh, a good question and quite challenging to think of. But when we talk about, as you said, uh, we have to isolate ourselves from the distant world. That is a fact. Neither you can deny nor I can deny. The only availability is the tools and the communication skills, right? And it has brought a lot of gaps on many of the sectors in the industry and so on. Yes, I know you are talking about the quarantine period. Are you? Meaning that? Hello, Gurpreet? Are you
Yes, yes, ma'am.
how the communication can be taken care of during the period of isolation through quarantine. Is that so?
Yes, yes.
Okay. A factor which I stated before, this is a very important fact that it has come. We cannot avoid it. It's unavoidable, right? At the same time, we are absolutely isolated. The human world is full of connect. We need people around us. Point. So, when it is in the quarantine period, I hope, am I audible? Am I audible to you? Well, in the quarantine period, we can identify.
It's breaking and
Am I audible now? Hello, am I audible now? In the quarantine period, we need to only look at how to manage our life with empathy, patience, which is a field of perseverance, and at the same time connect with our intrapersonal skills. We can utilize a form of meditation, or we can go for some creative art and hobbies by ourselves. And that's the main most important form which we can opt for, I would say. Somebody asked me which one is better for kids, virtual or should I go to the, yeah, yes, Siddharth Mohan.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Absolutely.
All right, ma'am. I cannot express the words to to say how happy I am to see you after so long through this virtual communication medium.
Happy to see you, one of the musketeer dear. You remember the three musketeers which I used to always share? And it's so nice
Definitely,
to
ma'am.
see you again. Please tell me.
Certainly, ma'am. Certainly. So, without further ado, I'd like to come to my question, ma'am. As your slides rightly pointed out, that 55% of interaction somewhere comes from facial and body language, and
Absolutely.
I think somewhere around 38%. And I think somewhere around 38% comes from your vocal skills, and I think only 7 to 10% comes from the words. So don't you think that virtual communication will be always a B plan compared to face-to-face communication, because it will lack many components compared to face-to-face communication?
That's the reason I described about, I agree with you, absolutely. At the same time, I would like to state about the fact that when we talk about 4Ps, we actually are lost with, through virtual communication, we are lost with our posture, our direct presentation. You agree with me, right? But then
Definitely.
93%, which actually stated by the researcher, is body language. And in that body language, we have the posture, the tone, the pitch, the modulation, the intonation. So all these factors, and above all, we cannot miss out content. So these are the factors we need to plan well. That itself is the purpose of
Just one more question is like
also
when a
verb.
large
Yes,
another question is, when a large audience is involved, virtual communication, I don't think is effective when it's an interactive session.
uh,
It's only effective in a one-sided communication, as far as I think.
I
Do you agree with
agree.
this?
Absolutely agree, because as I threw open the discussion in the form of a debate, I would also like to add one more note. Today, physical contact is absolutely isolated. Physical presence one to one cannot be, it is avoided, right? You agree with that. So, taking into consideration the skills to improvise on our skills and be technologically friendly. These two components, let's say for example, your ma'am has skills, but she's not that technological friendly, right? But there will be somebody who will help us to take forward the technologically, so that little handy we need to cover ourselves to practice how uh, I mean we can handle the technology. At the same time, we can have the effective field of communication through virtual. I agree with you, the point that it cannot replace. That's the reason I gave a little insight on direct communication, right? Because direct communication is absolutely based on facts and interaction. But then we need to accept this component form of communication today through virtual communication. Thanks, Siddharth. You also opened me door for the research question to take it forward through your statement. Well, with the time coming up, I would also like to end my presentation here with a next slide to share with all of you. Yeah. Well, thank you all, my dear esteemed audience, to be part of this communication, which is virtual, the art of virtual communication. And I would like to share a very favorite quote of mine. Everyone connects, everyone communicates, but few connects. And that connect, all the members as stakeholder audience gave that to me. I am available through my mail. You're all of you are very free to get connected, because this is absolute practical topic which can never end. It's just started, and discussion is yet to continue. Thank you, one and all. God bless you all.